Hello, Kansas and Western fans. Today we're going to do another how I do stuff video. And for today's video, I'm going to show you how I weather track. And first of all, before you start weathering your track, obviously you want to make sure you have any feeders installed. If you're going to solder your joints together, you want to make sure that's done. You also want to make sure you have any filler ties already in place. Not because it's totally necessary, but just because it saves you a little time later on, so you don't have to hand paint those. So that's something else to think about. Another thing that you might want to add is maybe bump stops at the end of your track. I'm not going to just yet because I have quite a bit of work to do in this scene, and some of the ones that I use are kind of delicate, and I'm kind of afraid if I bump those, I'll either break them or just misplace them anyway. So I'm going to hand paint those later. So for now, I just have these push pins standing in. So anyway, once you believe your track is all ready to go and tested, I would definitely make sure your track actually works. You run trains on it and so forth before you paint. But to start with, I do an overall color, and that's to make sure all the webbing on the sides of the rails gets covered, gets rid of all the plastic sheen that might be on your ties, and just does a good overall coat. And I'll come back later and add other coats and layers by hand, but an overspray covers it all really quickly and really easily and pretty cheaply too. So what I use to do that is pretty popular, I think. It's a Krylon camouflage color, and this is just camo brown. It's a nice flat color. This area here that you see that I've already done, it's very flat, doesn't really reflect much light, so that's a good generic color that I think lots of people use. So that's what I use. So what I'm going to do here is just show you how I hit this track really quick with this. And this is not something you want to do a whole lot of indoors. You want to have some ventilation for sure if possible, because these are some pretty nasty fumes. Wear a mask and all that. But I'm just going to do this quick section here just to show you how I do it. And I'm just trying to hit both sides, especially of the rails. And we'll call that good for this little section. And then what I'll do is I'll wipe the top of the rails with a piece of wood. So I just have a scrap piece of 1x4 here. And I like to use a piece of wood because it's just soft enough that it will do a good job of staying on the rails. And you can see there that it wiped them off pretty well. Although if you wait too long to do this, that paint will dry very quickly, and you'll have to do another method of cleaning. But you can see how well that worked, and it just wiped right off there. So definitely have one of those handy before you start this process, because it does dry quickly. So I'm going to let that dry and then come back to you to show you the next step that I do, and that would be painting the rail webbing a good rust color by hand with a brush. So I'll be right back with you. Okay, now that we've got the base coat done, which has just coated everything really well in case I miss anything with my following colors. Now what I'm going to use is this Testors, let's see if we find the label here, Flat Rust, which I like this color just for general rust uses anyway, but I think it's perfect for rail. So I've got a fairly small brush that's fairly new because you don't want a bunch of the bristles to be sticking out everywhere, but I'm just going to try to get the rail webbing here and the tie plates. These micro engineering Flex Track has really good detail between the tie plates, and you can even see a single spikes in each plate. So I do try to grab that. Initially, when you put on this coat, it looks really bright and shiny. It does dry flat and looks really good. And we'll show you that to you here in a little bit. But I'm just going to do a little example here of what I'm talking about. Now, generally, when I do the track, I only paint the side that faces the aisle, because you're just not going to ever really be able to see the other side. And it's difficult to paint that side anyway, because how can you really get a good look at it? I guess you could use a mirror, but then it's kind of tricky to paint that way. At least for me, it is. So I don't really bother with that. You might be able to see that on those cab ride videos. But you know what? I'm just not a perfect layout builder, and I'm just happy with that. So that's the way I chose to do it. So I'll go through here and do a little bit, and then come back. Now, since I'm kind of colorblind, it's kind of difficult for me to see the color change a little bit sometimes. So I try to do both sides evenly to make sure I don't lose track of where I am. And then you can see I'm getting some on top of the rail tops. No big deal at all. That easily wipes off with a Q-tip and some paint thinner. So I'm not too worried about making sure I stay on top of cleaning that off. But you can see here I'm just kind of moving along, just trying to do the best that I can here, covering the inside parts of the rail and apparently the top of the rail and the tie plates. So we'll let this dry, and then we'll come back and talk about how I weather the ties. Okay, so now with the rails dried, what I'm going to do is I'm going to heavily weather this track because it's an industrial spur, so it doesn't see a lot of maintenance. There isn't really a need to look for a lot of maintenance because all the traffic on it is pretty slow speed. So I'm going to use 3 different colors on the ties, and you can see there, this is all model color, burnt umber, tan earth, and sky gray. And what I'm going to do, you see the dye there in the foreground, I'm going to try to randomize the colors as much as I can. And I'm going to go one color at a time, and I'm going to use this palette, and I'll show you here in just a second, just so the other colors don't all dry out. But I'm going to show you my process here, and this is the one that I like to use. I know there's lots of them out there, but this is how I'm going to do it. So I'll show you here in just a second what I mean. Okay, you can see there I haven't put very much color paint on the palette there, and that's because I'm just going to be dry brushing this. I'm not going to do solid paints of the ties. I'm just going to use a little tiny bit, and then I have my paper towel here to do the dry brushing on. So let's see if I can demonstrate how I do this here. And I'm just going to start this. You can see the gap there in the 2 ties. That's kind of my starting point. I just kind of found a obvious point of interest. Sometimes I'll just put a stone or something on the side just to remind myself where I'm starting. But I'll just go ahead and start with the very first tie in this section. And I'm just not going to get very much paint on this at all. Dry brush most of it off. And then I'm just going to try, and I'm not perfect at this. I haven't done this very long. Don't use my technique as an example. I'm just trying to show you how I do certain things on my layout. I'm just trying to add just a little bit of color, trying to avoid the tie plates, and just don't forget to get the ends of the ties as well. All right, so I'm calling that good enough, and I'll randomize how I weather. So I'll roll the die. Came up with 2. So I will go to the second one from where I started. Skip 1 and go to 2. I'll do one more tie because it's pretty obvious, you know, it's just more of the same here. Roll the die one more time. That one's a 3. So I'll go to the third one down. 1, 2, 3. Now, if I get a little bit too much paint, it's okay, because at the end of this, I'm going to come back and do another dry brush on top of these just to kind of tone down the color a little bit. And I'll probably use that rust color or that burnt umber to do that. But so you can see what those 3 look like. I'm going to finish out with this color, this little stretch that I'm doing, and then I'll come back to you with the next color and show you how that looks. Okay, I've finished all the gray that I want to do, and you can see how the randomness works out with the 6-sided die. I worked until that gap. I'm just doing this small test section just for this video. So you can see how many ties that resulted in. 6 yields quite a bit difference here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this earth tan, I think it's called, and we're going to go over it again using the die to help generate some more randomness. So I'll show you what that looks like once I've finished that. All right, now you can see with that earth tone tan, I guess, with that added, it's kind of subtle. Sometimes it's difficult for me to tell the difference a little bit, but if you're if you can see colors easily, then you should be able to see the difference. I forgot to mention, when I use the die this second time, I do only count the unpainted ties. So you can still see some unpainted ties that haven't received any of the weathering treatment yet. And those are going to get filled in with this final color, this burnt umber. So what I'm going to do, instead of using the die this time, I'm going to paint every single one of the ties that hasn't been touched yet, and the ones that have, to kind of tie them all in together. And I wouldn't say I totally understand the method behind this. This is something that's been recommended to me from one of my earlier videos when I did a test sample of this in the Holly area. A viewer recommended doing this. I tried it and I liked it. So that's what I do now on my tie weathering technique. So I'm going to go back and add that burnt umber to the rest of these ties and show you what that looks like when I'm done. Okay, so here's the final look of the 3 different colors added and all tied in together. I call this final in regards to this is a step that I can do before I'm ready to ballast. So I've got the ties all weathered to the point that I think it looks good. And once it's ballasted, I'm probably going to come back and add some more weathering that ties in the ballast itself. Add some oil streaks. This is the Holcomb powered plant, so there's probably going to be some black elements of coal in there from droppings from the rail cars. So anyway, that's what I would call a full weathering session on my track. So I hope this explains my process anyway. I'm still learning, so if you have any other tips, please feel free to add them in the comments. Or if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So I guess that's it for how I weather track. Thanks for watching.